So I'm up to 2011 in the Stanley Cup Great Series playlist. And, we're into the Luongo era in Vancouver. And the Luongo era in Vancouver is one where I found myself at odds with both fans and kind of with myself. Now, the reputation that Luongo has for his time in Vancouver as a goaltender in the playoffs depends on your perspective. If you're a Hawks fan, you think he sucked. That's odds are the way that Hawks fans see him. And when we get into what happened with the Hawks series and how much the Hawks scared the heck out of me as a Canucks fan back then, rightfully so, there is something to be said for Luongo's numbers being poor, but let's get into that. Now, his career numbers in Vancouver, 916 save percentage in Vancouver. That's not bad for a playoff save percentage over your career. In Florida, it was 934. I think Luongo was more comfortable in Florida than in Vancouver. Now, in his career, that means he has a 918 save percentage in the playoffs. Here are some comparables, some Hall of Fame level comparables. Marty Brodeur, 919. So for all of their playoff games, Brodeur's save percentage is 1 point higher than Luongo's. Dominik Hasek, 925, one of the greatest playoff performers ever. Patrick Roy, 918, same save percentage. Lundqvist, 922. Chris Osgood, a lot of cup rings there, 916. And Corey Crawford, 919, one of the goaltenders who was on the other end of the ice from Luongo during one of those Chicago series. So, when you look at it, Luongo's numbers aren't bad. The honest truth is, Luongo, there were two things with Roberto Luongo's time in Vancouver. One, I don't think he liked playing against Chicago a whole lot. And two, he didn't get the goal support when he was having a bad game. There were bad games, and as soon as he started having a bad game, the other problem I had, and we'll get into that as well, was Alain Vigneault. And maybe it was a loyalty thing to Luongo at the time, because there were games where Luongo would play where maybe he shouldn't have due to nagging injuries. And it was, Roberto wanted to play, so I threw him in there. So it may very well have been he didn't want to pull Roberto out of a game. He may have felt it wouldn't have made a difference. And so he left him in there even after he'd get off to a slow start. Now, 2006, 2007, I'm not going to get into his goaltending then because it was superb. 12 games played. The Canucks had 18 goals in those 12 games. They scored a goal and a half per game, and they still got to Game 5 of Round 2 against Anaheim because Luongo dragged them there. And yet, when he allowed the overtime goal in Game 5 against Anaheim, I still heard complaints from Canuck fans about how, he should have stopped that one. He was distracted. He was waiting for a whistle on a penalty that wasn't coming. So we just ignored all the other saves he'd made the rest of the game, and we would focus on the mistake he made. And I thought, if they'd scored some goals, we wouldn't needed to go to overtime. That was a team that could not score. 07-08, they missed the playoffs, and famously, Luongo had a rough stretch down the home stretch of the season, and so they got beat out for that last playoff spot. And again, the criticism that got rained down upon him was loud. And I kept saying, but if he has a bad game, they're not bailing him out. So 08-09 comes around. They played 10 playoff games. They had 29 goals. Good goal support overall. They get into round 2. And against Chicago, in game 1, he saves 28 out of 31, 903 save percentage, and he gets the win. Game 2, he saves 26 out of 31, 839 save percentage. He takes the loss. So this is kind of how this goes. If he plays well, and if he doesn't play well, again, they don't bail him out, and they have a coach that's not taking him out of the game. 23 saves on 24 shots in Game 3 for a 958 save percentage. Game 4, 26 saves on 28 shots, a 929 save percentage, and he takes the loss. So that's a game where Luongo plays very well, and the goal support just isn't there. They only score 1 goal in that game, I believe. Game 5, 26 saves on 29 shots, 897 save percentage. He takes the loss. Now, Game 2, he didn't have great numbers. Outside of that, the lowest save percentage is 897 in Game 5. But what everybody remembers is Game 6. That the Vancouver Canucks played a sloppy game, and Luongo saves 23 out of 30, 767 save percentage in the loss. The other argument I used to make quite often, and again, people can write this off as just being a Luongo fanboy. That's fine. If you want to do that, you can. Is that when the Hawks had their shots, they were right in front of the net. They were teeing it off from 5 feet in front of them, right in front of the net. Whereas the Canucks shots tended to be more from the perimeter because they had that really solid blue line in Chicago that was getting ready to win them a Stanley Cup. And so even if the shots were near even, it felt like the better scoring opportunities belonged to Chicago. But again, when I would make that argument, it was, well, the shots were really near the same. And I'm like, yeah, but where was Chicago getting those shots from? And so this was an ongoing debate in 2009. Because remember, this is year 3 now with Luongo. And they still haven't won a Stanley Cup, so clearly he's overpaid and he sucks. And I wish I wasn't having that debate already at that point, but I was. Where it was like, well, no, he doesn't. Oh, no, he sucks. No, see, no. So 2010 rolls around. They played 12 playoff games. They had 43 goals. They scored tons of goals. But they end up against Chicago again. So 2010, they end up against Chicago. Game 1, he saves 36 out of 37, and he gets the victory. So it wasn't on Luongo in that first game. Game 2, 30 saves on 33 shots for a .909 save percentage. He takes the loss. Game 3, 30 saves on 35 shots, .857 save percentage. He takes the loss. And I'm going to admit, Game 4, not great. 27 saves on 33 shots, .818 save percentage. He takes the loss. So he's allowed 11 goals over 2 games there. They're down 3-1. And that's right about where I just throw my hands in the air and say, I'm done. They won Game 5. 29 saves on 30 shots for Luongo, .967 save percentage with the win. And I remember people arguing with me where they're like, all right, here they come. And I'm like, nah. Why? Because it's Chicago. They're not going to win 3 in a row against Chicago. I think Luongo had an issue playing against Chicago, and I think part of it was that they would tear apart that Canucks defense seemingly regularly and with ease. And I think there was kind of a mental break against Chicago that kind of showed up the year after. But in Game 6 of 2010 series, he saves 30 out of 35, .857 save percentage, takes the loss, and they're out in round 2 again. So as we get into 2010, 2011, one of the conversations that's starting to gain a lot of steam is, hey, this Corey Schneider kid's pretty good. Maybe we should look at Schneider going in there and maybe move on from Luongo's contract. Luongo has this really long contract, and if we could move on from that, that might be for the best. I'm still on the Luongo train at this point. They played 25 games in the 2011 Stanley Cup run to the finals. In round 1, they had 16 goals over 7 games. That's a little over 2. Round 2, they had 14 goals over, I believe that was a 6-game series against Nashville, so a little bit above 2 goals. 20 goals in round 3 against San Jose, where they just ran San Jose out of the rink. And then in the finals, they had 8. Everybody remembers the finals and, Luongo against Boston. Yeah, the Canucks managed 8 goals in 7 games. 8. Now, against Chicago, we all remember the dragon and dragon slaying line from Shorthouse and all this wonderful stuff. Was it Houston or Shorthouse? Doesn't matter. We all remember the line. And I don't care who said it. I really don't. But we all remember the line that they'd slayed the dragon. Pretty sure it was Shorthouse. And yeah, everybody remembers that moment. Overtime win, and Burrows saves the day, and we're all good. But boy, did their demons ever come out during this series. Game 1, Luongo saves all 32 shots for the shutout. First time he's shut out the Chicago Blackhawks. And this series felt different. Game 2, 23 saves on 26 shots, an .885 save percentage, and a win. It's the first time he gets a win against Chicago where he has a save percentage below 900. Before that, he had a .903 here, then a .958, a .973, and a .967. He has to be pretty darn near perfect, or else the Canucks aren't going to beat the Hawks. Game 2, as I said, .885. And then in Game 3, he's darn near perfect in this one. 30 saves on 32 shots, .938 save percentage for the win. The Canucks are up 3-0. Right? Game 4, everything falls apart. The whole thing falls apart. They save 22 out of 28, or he saves 22 out of 28, .786 save percentage. This asterisk means he got pulled. Now, Game 5, he saves 8 out of 12, 667 save percentage, a loss, and he gets pulled again. And this is where I'm screaming as a Canucks fan, because I'm like, it's going to happen again. I can't believe this. Keep in mind, this is 2011. This is a year after I watched the Boston Bruins blow a 3-0 series lead against Philadelphia. And after Game 5, I'm going, this feels familiar. Game 6, he ends up coming in relief of Corey Schneider. The Canucks get into the overtime. He makes 12 saves on 13 shots, .923 save percentage, but he allows the game-winning goal, so the loss is on him. Game 7, Luongo's back in net. And keep in mind, this is after 3 losses in a row. He played well in Game 6 in relief. He struggled in Games 4 and 5, and this is where you can really sort of see this psych out that the Hawks have over the Canucks. And it was the entire Canucks. We can all point to Luongo. This video is on Luongo. But the Canucks struggled. Now, Game 7, 31 saves on 32 shots against the Hawks. .969 save percentage, and he gets the win. He slays that dragon. So they go through rounds 2 and 3. And some of the complaints about Luongo fade a little bit. They fade. Well, we go to Game 1 against Boston. 36 save shutout. Shuts out the Bruins. Easy to forget that. Game 2, 28 saves on 30 shots, .933 save percentage. He gets the win. At home, it's a key thing, at home, he owns the Bruins. They go to Boston, Game 3, and everything falls apart. 8-1 victory for Boston. All 8 goals tagged on him. That's why there's a question mark, because I'm not sure why he didn't get pulled. It was obvious early in that game. Luongo, the defense, the whole team, not with it. That's where you take Luongo out, you put Schneider in, and you try to change things around. 30 saves on 38 shots for a .789 save percentage. Game 4, he would get pulled after allowing 4. 16 saves on 20 shots, .800 save percentage, and he takes the loss. It's not good in Boston. So coming out of Game 4, my thought is, okay, the Canucks are imploding again. 31 saves on 31 shots in Game 5. A shutout for Luongo turns things around. The Canucks are on the verge of winning a Stanley Cup. They're up 3-2. Game 6, I will agree with all Canuck fans watching everywhere, they should have played Corey Schneider. And I had that argument plenty. Schneider needs to go in Game 6. Luongo doesn't play well in Boston. The Canucks need to have Schneider in there, give the Bruins a different look, because Schneider is pretty darn near as good as Luongo. Their numbers over the season were really close. So Schneider at that point and Luongo, it was 1A and 1B. Game 6, they start Roberto. 5 saves on 8 shots, .625 save percentage. He gets pulled. It's too late. They take the loss. Game 7, we all know what happens in Game 7. 17 saves on 20 shots. 3 goals allowed by Luongo, .850 save percentage, and they lose. They come up with Bupkis, 0 goals at home in a Game 7. A lot of the blame ends up getting shifted to Luongo, and I remember at the time thinking and saying to people, you can't blame a goaltender when you manage 8 goals over 7 games. You can't expect that goaltender to beat a team when you only got 8 goals. And one of the reasons why, and I always hear this conversation about whether or not the Canucks are one of the most talented teams never to win a Stanley Cup, they struggled to seal the deal. Struggling to seal the deal is one of those reasons why, while I look back at that team and I say, yeah, they were really, really good, I still have a hard time making the assertion that they had that greatness. Right here, Game 5, they get the shutout. It's 2 shutouts in 3 games for Luongo at home. And I remember Don Cherry saying after Game 6, when we're going back to Vancouver for Game 7, and how Luongo's numbers are awful throughout the series, and he says, if the Canucks win Game 7 at home, Luongo has to be the Conn Smythe winner, because he said none of the rest of the Canucks have even shown up. And he was right. And yet, when we look back at that era, a lot of people will say Luongo was the weak point. And I, as absolutely, I agree. I was a Luongo fanboy now, always have been. I didn't think he was the problem. I thought there were a lot of problems that were on that would happen with that team. Sometimes you don't pull the goalie. Sometimes you're not putting the right one in. There were definitely years along the way here where Luongo was nursing injuries or he was getting overplayed. That was an issue as well. And in the end, he took a lot of blame. But his career numbers, you look at these numbers and you go, oh, that's terrible. But still, he posted a career save percentage of .916 as a Canucks goaltender in the playoffs. His overall numbers weren't that bad. The Canucks had this way of making it more difficult on themselves. They could have swept a series here. Nope. They were up 2-0 here and lost 4 out of 5. So here they had a chance to eliminate the Hawks, and it took them 4 tries, and even then it was overtime in Game 7, and I was terrified of Game 7. And here, they just couldn't seal the deal against the Bruins. So let me know what you guys think. If you're a Canucks fan, looking back on this era, how much of this do you put on Luongo? And how much do you put on the rest of the team? I thought the Sedins, well, I've never been one to call them the sisters and all that other stupid stuff. There were times in the playoffs, Boston had no problem shutting down the Sedins, and then there just wasn't any other kind of attack to speak of that was able to thwart the Bruins' defense. It was just an absolute blanket over the Canucks offense throughout that series. And it felt like the pressure on Luongo was really, really heavy. Does that lead to that 8-1 loss in Game 3? I don't think so, but I don't think it helps. I don't think it helps when you feel like you have to play perfect. And that's not just the goaltender, but the defense as well. Where, if we don't play perfect, we're probably not going to get the goal support. So maybe that makes things more difficult. I'd be really interested to know what you guys think. This is something that, I saw one of my Facebook memories from 7 years ago where I was complaining about this exact thing, where I felt like Luongo was taking a lot of blame for things that had gone wrong in Vancouver. And while I felt like, yes, he deserved some for some of these results, I also felt like the team didn't bail him out when he had a bad game. And there are goaltenders on this board that might have had a bad playoff game and got bailed out. The team in front of them goes, all right, we got to do this. And it felt like for Vancouver, when Luongo would get off to a slow start, the whole team would sag. And we would see more and more shots from right in front of the net, that prime real estate if you're a goal scorer. And I ended up feeling bad for Lou. But I'd be interested to know what you guys think. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. It means a ton during this point in time in our history. And hey, thank you guys so much. I will talk to you again soon.